Hello, land taxers. Now you might be asking yourself, why did he call me a land taxer? And what does that even mean? Truth be told, I do not know, but I do know that it comes from the card land tax, and today's interview subject has done updated artwork for many iconic cards like it. I would like to introduce MTG artist Chuck Lukacs. So let's get to the interview.
Thank you very much for joining me today.
I love the halo of Hydra heads you've got in my version of doubling season there. It's awesome,
I know.
man.
I love it. I love this. I love it, and I love the fact that you seem to be, as of late at least, and actually kind of throughout your pretty much your whole career, Magic. You're sort of like the special card edition kind of guy.
They've given me a lot of opportunities, over the years, and whereas they might not use me for being a normal artist, like a steady artist on every deck. They have used me for these big, heavy hitting cards where, that's pretty much been impetus for my career to go as long as it has.
How would you describe your style of art? What would you use as far as description goes?
Let's see. I could name some early influences.
That's
from
go. Yeah, that'll be good.
And when Magic first latched onto me, it was Jeremy Jarvis, and it was during Lorwyn, which was kind of like the world building book was went a bit kids book, went a bit children's literature. So I think some of my influences, Maurice Sendak and Patrick Woodruff, and some of these illustrators that may not have been college trained or had very, very distinct stylistic mark making and color or contrast, or any number of different things that made them themselves as a painter. That came through early on, and I've kind of it's been kind of like butting heads, especially after I've gone digital, to retain just enough of that initial spark in order to stay relevant within the game. But because
have you gone entirely digital, or because your stuff is really hard to? It's hard for me as a viewer to make out what it is that the actual art is made of, because it's very it's very mercurial, I guess is the word.
That's good to hear, Aaron. It's I remember when Fairy Godmother dropped, all the collectors were asking, like, I gotta buy this, like, and I had to tell them that it was only kind of half done in terms of me not having enough time to finish it out traditionally. But even though that finished out traditionally, or that finished out digitally, and the last couple of cards that I've done, I think Cyclonic Rift and Thoughtseize, were finished out digitally, I still start traditionally in that there's at least a sketch. The sketch is always done traditionally, and sometimes I'll go back, print things out, paint over the top of that, shoot it back in, and like I'll have this kind of give and take of traditional digital, and that's, I think, why folks view it as that painting behind you is almost purely digital. That was my first, and I thought it was good because there wasn't a lot of time to do it, and on my end, and they needed it to look flat. In the brief, it was they wanted it to look like an oldie worldy map. So I thought, if I'm going to make a mistake, it should be something that looks very two-dimensional, and I wouldn't have to, compensate for my lack of digital skills at the time. But I don't know. It's kind of like a give and take right now. I used to see digital as like a cop-out, but nowadays not so much. It's a it's a time saver for me, and I would for sure do everything traditional if I had the time to. But fingers crossed. I've recently stepped down from teaching, so I might have some more time for doing everything traditional and having those paintings to sell.
And where did you teach?
The Pacific Northwest College of Art in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, I bet you're a fun teacher.
I'd like to think so. I don't know. I always used to start each class with saying a couple teachers that were like, one of which was a complete hard ass, and the other was like a softie. And I'd like to consider myself more in the center of those two teachers, but probably err to the softie side, I'm guessing. But I don't know. Creativity is a fun thing. It should be like play. It should be like you stepping back into childhood in many ways. And when you have a really somber, hard-ass teacher, that it's hard to get there, or at least was my experience.
I agree with you. I had a photography teacher that was so stoic. It was just like, just beep. Like, you couldn't. If he loved something, he'd be like, I love that. And if he hated it, he'd be like, I hate that. And it's just like, oh. But
Okay.
what I would about the briefs that you get now, am I crazy in thinking that your art has much more, I feel, of stories built into it? I think you have such a wild imagination. There is such a joy to your work. There is a childlike wonder to it, and then at the same time, it's completely nightmarish in a lot of things. So it's definitely got that going on. But what was, like, say, the brief for the Fairy Godmother? Because there's so much happening in it, and
Yeah.
I wonder what the background of everything is.
That was, I remember getting briefs for different card games completely other than Magic. And if I was ever given the choice by the art director to pick and choose which brief, I would always stay away from, like, this battle scene is happening in the background, and this particular character, you've got to nail down a couple different characters, likeness and whatnot. I would be like, okay, yeah, that's too many, it's too much stuff to sketch. And so I'd go with the more simple briefs if I could. This one, complicated as it was a brilliant exercise in visual problem solving. And I remember Cynthia Shepard was the art director, and she just has wonderful work. It's working with certain art directors, you kind of like, or at least I do, I'm like awestruck at like the kind of project that you'll end up giving them, can't compare to their own work in some ways. But that brief was rather complicated. It had like, I had to hit a couple visual beats throughout that piece, and the Fairy Godmother couldn't suffer from any of the other elements going on. So gave a couple different posings, gave a couple different framings of that piece. And once one was narrowed down into, then things like, the designing of limbs, the designing of background pieces to foreground pieces came into play. And that was difficult because there was 2 flying mounts and a castle with gardens around.
There's so much happening.
There's a lot. And my normal modus operandi is to break things down into a sort of 2-dimensional theatrical backdrops. This I learned from Maury Sendak. I mentioned him again, big influence. But during a lecture, a very rare lecture, he mentioned when he's designing pieces for kids' books, he thought of those things as theatrical drops that would drop into scenes. So I try to think in that way, in as much as it's not going to ruin the depth of field and ruin the realism. And I don't think it does in the, I keep on looking up because I've got it up here
Uh,
in the Fairy Godmother.
Oh, is the originals up there? Or the quasi original, I guess,
No,
or
I
what is it?
haven't finished the original.
Really?
That's buried in the stack.
It's buried?
I
Oh
just,
no.
I'm
Why
looking
is it
like if
buried?
I've got anything out where anything's indie. Yeah, I'm good.
Oh yeah, well, if anything like that happens, we will cut it out.
Yeah,
Anything like that,
I
like
know.
no worries.
You
I've
can
had
probably see the original Vanquisher
I think so,
and
yes.
Burrenton Forge-Tender, a print of Burrenton Forge-Tender back there.
That's
But yeah, in front it's just a print of the Fairy Godmother. But yeah, that was a complex piece, but I think it gained from that complexity.
it's so much it's got so much going on. It's almost and not that it's a shame, but it is a shame almost that it has to be covered up by the magic card mechanics, because there is a lot going on now. So okay, how long does it take for you to do your average piece if you were just going fully traditional? How long does it take you to finish a piece?
Well, I'd like to say that I've gotten quicker, especially after teaching. But it's never a case where there's only one thing going on. So to try and track that speed is a difficult thing. I would say if nothing else is going on, probably a week and a half would
Wow.
be like the quickest that. And again, level of complexity matters too. If it's just like a creature character where you can just, kind of no holds bar thing, then that's awfully quick. Where if you've got a very specific character within the world, you've got a dynamic that needs to be associated visually, and you have revisions on top of that, that just extends and extends that. But most of that is done in the sketch stage, and that sketch stage, at least recently, has taken a couple different goes.
I mean, and I saw the article about you on Hipsters of the Coast and how much your sketches actually go for. That's it. That is super impressive. I mean,
amazes me. To a large extent, the collectors and internationally have saved us through lockdown and the pandemic, because we took a big hit in not having a lot of conventions, no conventions until
right.
just recently. I've seen a couple folks in Texas starting up shows, but yeah, I can't thank the collectors enough for kind of really, saving our ass, pulling the year together where it could have, it normally is financially, we financially struggle. We stay in this game, most of us, just because we love it so much. We love like painting, sci-fi, fantasy. But so it's normally this din of financial struggle and the pandemic on top of it, and a lot of us already spending a lot on overhead on shows. It was going to be disastrous. So a lot of the the high sales and high price sales that collectors have been moving towards nowadays is it's a godsend. Thank you so much. It's my sketches tend to be there tends to be a little bit more line quality involved, because I came from a tradition of wood engraving. So some of the detail is lost on the screen shots and things like that. So you're not really seeing the whole piece unless you're right up in front of it. But yeah, it's I still can't even believe a lot of it.
I mean, but your stuff, that makes sense that you have a background in wood engraving that you're like, for instance, the Theros cards, like they have such a focus and clarity to them and such symmetry that blows my mind. Well, this one behind me too, the symmetry. When you do symmetry in your work, it's I don't know how to do it. I mean, do you use a ruler? I mean, how do you keep things from just? I mean, it's almost like it's a mirrored version of it. Is that something you're able to do just by yourself?
Speaking of symmetry, I just like got that word caught in my head. It's kind of an easy way to go. I remember my first couple successful pieces in school were completely symmetrical, and I kept with that even into my life in ceramics and craft. If you go to the we were just going to Genesis Generator before the interview started, but if you go to my website, it has under illustration some of that handcraft, wood engraving, ceramic, ornamental tile work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a case of where you're doing things like bookends. And, you know, you think in terms of like what might be on an arched doorway, and that kind of symmetry. You got one thing facing one way and the other, and you're kind of like, when I'm sculpting anyways, I do both of them at the same time, almost even like certain strokes at the same time, just so where nothing gets I did this one Genesis Generator output that was piebald gaiters and an Elizabethan ornament. And I sent those two cards. I did two cards that were symmetrical along an arch, but one of the forgive me, my cat's freaking out.
Strange voice, strange voice.
The I ended up sending them to Tom Gencott at Wizards, and kept that one specifically non-symmetrical. Like one of the heads of the crocodiles was facing one way and the other was the other way, I think. But I don't know. There's a way in which you can fool the audience. Forgive me.
Oh no, it's okay. I have Shih Tzus running about beneath me right now.
Anyway, it's good. I kept the door open, knowing that this was going to happen. There's a way in which you can fool folks into thinking something's symmetrical, and the way in which you can fool folks into thinking symmetry is asymmetrical. It happens a lot. I taught a character design class, so this happens in everybody's facial expressions. Not only expressions, but just, you know, when you're resting face, nobody is really completely symmetrical.
Right.
And oftentimes when you see yourself in reverse, it's like, that's
it's weird. You're like, oh, yeah, because everybody's eyes are slightly, they're slightly different in a different place. I've noticed that that's the thing.
Yeah. So, and kind of the same thing is like, if you have a completely, like, let's say if you're drawing with a symmetry filter, and you have a face, and it's supposed to look anything but like a sculpted mask or something for the brief, then you'll notice it almost instantaneously. It's just like too perfect. And then there's a way in which you can fool folks with symmetry. In like, I got a whole ton of work with the Theros.
Yes. The Theros ones are very much what I was noticing, and I'm fascinated by them in every way that I can be. Like, I feel like the Elspeth one was maybe what you were just talking about, where you can fool with symmetry, because it appears to be symmetrical, but she's standing at an angle. But the Ashiok one, that's there's some tricks in there, but damn, it's very impressive. I feel like you could split it down the middle and it would mirror. It would just work.
It's that was a fantastic piece. I was overjoyed to get Ashiok too. You run a similar danger of uncanny valley with, I've noticed, especially with those last 3 planeswalkers that I did in that trompe l'oeil, or, you know, bas relief kind of effort.
What was it again? Bas relief?
that it looks sculpted.
Okay,
It's
all
a
right.
painting of a sculpture. And in a lot of ways, it's more difficult than if I had a fleshy character to work with.
Oh
In that
yeah.
there's a couple degrees of visualization that folks have to go through, and it's a lot like seeing one of those robots that are. I recently did this thing with an app, the Wombo app, which was chilling to me to see, my painting, the thing that I'd made a lot of, every mark, every blend of liquid paint has come to life into this
Oh really?
model. But I'm getting off course. The Ashiok especially, it was difficult because I wanted to get a different level of realism to those pieces that are pretty much like 1.5 to 2 feet depth of field. If you're like taking a picture of a sculpture like that,
Hmm.
and to get everything, all of the ornamentation in the background, and everything working in conjunction, it is sometimes more difficult than if I'd have got a brief of just a character with a real background. You don't have to deal with any kind of the audience visualizing symbol instead of an actual three-dimensional light and shadow object. It's kind of slightly, you have to go through a different process, and it's kind of like the uncanny valley, where it's real, not real, and certain folks will just drop that. They'll not want to be questioned, or their brain, high-end brain connection doesn't want to go through that questioning, so they'll just move to the next piece.
They reject it
So,
immediately, almost like
yeah,
instinctually. Okay, yeah.
it's
I mean,
difficult.
but at the same time, I mean, I guess I feel bad for people who would do that, because I feel that at least, I mean, with Ashiok, the uncanny valley almost sort of, it lends itself to it, and so does the Theros set in general. I mean, these are mythologies, essentially, or sort of just revisions of it, and so you know, it it just works. It's the Ashiok, the way you make it look like it's lit a little bit from beneath, so you see the shadows of the statue in the background. It's fascinating, and then just I mean, just everything about it. It's a like it's a treasure trove of it. One of the questions that I did want to ask about Elspeth was, in the background on the wall, there is her defeating. It looks like a demon. Is the other one Heliod?
It was the two foes that were Heliod and
Heliod and
uh,
Erebus? No, Xenagos.
Xenagos.
Yeah, okay, there we go. Man, well, I'm glad, because I never noticed the Heliod, and I would just loved watching that son of a bitch get it, because he's such a jerk. I mean, he's he's a monster. He's such a jerk. Oh, Heliod. Love playing him, hate him as a person. But so with the like other things that, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, for instance, the the Lash the Tyrant, like, again, it's fascinating. Where where did the Theros cards kind of come to you? Where did that sort of, when did they become aware that you had this sort of like style world inside you, and that you were going to do this, like, essentially this line of the iconic stuff, Theros?
I love the fact that you brought up Lash the Tyrant. That's one of my favorite ones, in that they gave me a long evil leash. Like,
They did.
a lot of my stuff is kind of like lighthearted, but that was a one where I got to, like, throw snakes out of people's eyes, and like,
Yes, yeah.
they're like
It's a
grimacing in pain.
it's a very H.R. Geiger sort of, like, in Rome had a baby or something.
Yeah. No, I like that piece, and I like even put like blood splatter and stuff on that, because
Oh yeah.
to not, I don't know, there's so much there's not a lot of it, but there's, an artist can get typecast into certain visual genres, and a lot of my stuff is whimsical. I don't really like, when I'm sketching in my sketchbook, it's not a lot of evil stuff, but there's like some, subtly
Oh yeah. Your stuff has definitely got a dark
weirdness in
undercurrent
there.
of horror. I mean, the Morningtide, like the Kithkins, the changelings that you did. I mean, those are freaky, freaky.
Well, the style book for Laura Wynn, those I think a lot of those were Steve Prescott, and we don't necessarily design the creatures, all of them. They come pre-designed sometimes, but those, yeah, those the Kiskins were awesome. They got like the big giant, in Shadowmoor. They got the big giant red eyes, like, and the you just mentioned the Ashen characters that.
Ashiok, you mean Heliod or Xenagos? Which
No, the embered chested.
Lash to the Tyrant.
It's from Morningtide or
Okay.
Shadowmoor,
I will pull it up. I'm looking at it. So it's one of your cards, right?
the thing that is difficult is they kind of give us code when I've got like this ashen creature in my head, but it's like on my card, Shared Animosity.
Yes.
Characters, like, those are just fascinatingly evil. Like, they're like burning from inside, and
Yeah.
the whole of the face is this kind of wicked mask with horned elements. It was wonderful working on that.
A Nightmare Incursion. I mean, there's, I guess, maybe because I know, right? And that like swirling, like Mog, like just pulling them in. There's like an element of almost like it feels like your stuff is sort of like watery, and it looks like it's very liquid in the way that it's done. And I've noticed that you also do seem to be, at least, I'm not sure if this is a style guide, but I've noticed that you include a lot of at least symbols that seem to be your kind of like your thing entirely, because it almost looks like a variation of the way you sign your name in your pieces. Like in Lay of the Land, the writing that's around the land.
Oh, the runic text, yeah. Oh,
and
that's not specifically Forthok runic text, but I was surprised not to get any work for Kaldheim, because I sketch when I sketch in my sketchbook, I'll write in Forthok runic text, which is like a transliteration of Viking Scandinavian text that Tolkien used for some of his Dwarven scripts. But yeah, you're not the only person to say that, and that, like, in terms of like the amorphic blobular substance that I can make part of like wood just as easily as I can flames or vapor. When I think the common element is that I would leave that up to the paint when I was when I had a whole ton of projects to get done at once. I would leave areas with mineral spirits to kind of do its own thing. Watch. It's kind of like when ink blooms, it forms these amorphic blobular patterns that you really can't paint. If you're out to paint them, it's quite difficult. It's kind of almost like trying to form tradition when I'm painting digitally. It's almost next to impossible. So I'd kind of like let those, the line quality perhaps in some cases, or the color in others, form itself, and then use that pattern to create the imagery on top of that. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I remember that being when I got it from an illustrator. You mentioned Giger before. The light half of Giger is a guy named Robert Venosa, and they both studied under Salvador Dali, and so they got some of their surrealism from Dali, but Giger was always very dark imagery, and Robert Venosa was always very kind of lighthearted, circus-like imagery. And but they use the same technique. Ernst Fuchs is another artist that that would kind of like just have this very expressionistic, abstract splattering of spirits and paint on top of the canvas or board or whatever they're working on. And then imagery starts to form out of that. And a lot of, you know, contemporary illustrators will still do the same thing. It's a little bit more risky. And when we started out talking about in as much time as I have to finish out something traditionally, that's the kind of thing that gets cut, unfortunately, because it's almost completely serendipitous and hard to control.
Yeah, you can't replicate it or control it. It's elemental, and it's like it sort of is like that's how it is. Like if you come out with blue eyes, you got blue eyes. If you come out with brown, you got brown. And once it's there, you can't rewrite the DNA.
Unless you go digital.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm seeing the Burrenton Forge-Tender. That's a perfect example of the flames of that were in the sketch, just a couple of lines to document where that expression was going to happen. And then the art director, I think that was Jeremy Jarvis, the good ones anyways, trust the artist enough to know that that's going to work out. And that's going to work out in the paint. They've seen it happen a number of different times before. So they trust the artist to accomplish that serendipitous effect, whatever it might be.
What is going on in Etchings of the Chosen? I stare at that all the time. It's and then looking at it up close, it's really horrific. What kind of, I don't know what hell that is that we're in, but what was the impetus behind that?
That I'm trying to think of the brief. It was some sort of like a device that was picking a particular beast or creature. That's why I have that clockwork arm kind of happening there. And whatever dynamic that creature had would be the dynamic of the card or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the brief was.
I feel like you get these I think you get these more elaborate storylines more so than other people do, at least from the ones I've spoken to, because, well, I mean, I think everybody, you know, certain people have their elements of strengths and whatnot, and it would be difficult for some artists, I mean, no matter how good they are, to sort of have that like literary inspiration kind of mind, if that makes any sense, because you do seem to me that you have a good grasp on like creative writing and that kind of thing as well. Am I wrong?
I'd like to think so. You ask about this particular piece there. I'm just looking at it now, and one of the things that, well, most of the creatures were created out of the Genesis generator, the humanoid.
Really? Okay, yeah.
I'm looking at from left to right, it'd be like crab, and then I put a rib cage of some sort, so more like mammalian rib cage on the crest of the crab. The one next to it is raven, I think, because there's feathers around that mantle, and then obviously octopus or squid or something. So there's, and it had wings, these kind of skeletal wings. The one below it is the most creepy to me, in that it's a worm, like my worm harvest or worm token, but then a sheep's head fish, if you've ever seen a sheep's head fish. And I don't like necessarily encourage you looking at these pictures, but
why? I mean, they're horrifying, but they're great.
It's a fish with like what looks like human teeth and rows of these flattened human-like teeth. And so that was part of that one. Tiger, gorilla, I think was the next one. Some sort of herd animal with the horns, and again, ape, I think, with those big meaty arms. But
Did
yeah, all of that came from Genesis Generator, and just
Genesis Generator, tell everybody what that is, because if everybody doesn't know, because what we're going to do is I'm going to do one of them. I'm going to then do the artwork after the interview from the Genesis Generator, and then embarrass myself at the end of this video.
No.
Oh, yes.
It's all just about ideas. That's the thing. My books, Fantasy Genesis books, and Genesis Generator included, can fall rather flat if you're not into creating out of that word association. It can be at its very basis a couple of words. And if you let those words just sit there on the page and not form connections, and literary or otherwise, then it's just a couple words. But it can be magical. It can be fascinatingly, it can focus attention on just a couple of parameters, so where the floodgates of creativity just open up. And that's what I've found with this stuff anyways. Let me go to it and just.
Yeah, because this is it's fun for everybody who hasn't gone to it. You can go there and do it yourself.
I didn't want to put the age restriction, but it looks up pictures, and so I didn't want,
better safe than sorry.
Seeing.
Traumatizing some like 7-year-old. I mean, because your stuff. I mean, if your stuff was it would be a solid PG-13.
Well, magic in general is rated, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And don't get me started on when like little people are playing. I'm like, no. Too young. Pokemon it out for a few more years.
I've noticed since we're on this thing, I was going to ask if like swears were appropriate.
Oh yeah, you can curse all you want. Yeah, I've already cursed twice, I think.
Now that I'm coming out of teaching, I've been noticing how much when I became a teacher anyways, I'll speak for myself, I stifled all the swears, and you become almost like what I'd imagine a parent does when they're trying to I don't know.
When they're like, I can't.
Broken glass in order to be the person that you want the child to become.
As I want my mom would be like, watch your mouth.
Exactly. So now that I'm stepping away from it, I'm like, hey, I can do whatever the hell I want.
You just said the hell word. Oh. But yeah, no, you can curse. You can curse till the live long day. I mean, I guess I should make that clear. It's a curse free, or not curse free, but curse friendly here. Fucking shit.
Awesome. All that shit. Let's go to the humanoid game. And,
okay.
I'll just roll through a couple. It gives you the choice to go back. I normally encourage this to be very quick, because sometimes most eye and brain connection works so much quicker than we could ever sketch, or we've got about 1,000 or more ideas before we even start to make a couple of marks. So that's why focusing in attention on just a couple of words and the brevity at which you might see them and roll back to them really kind of matters in this. Well, for me anyways, when I'm looking at what might.
Well, wait, this is supposed to be timed as well? This is a timed thing too?
No, if that's part of your process.
Well, Chuck, we're not all we're not all like you. I mean, you should I think your mind maybe has 1,000 ideas. Mine has
No. That's just everybody. That's unless you have some sort of cognitive issues. That's why I taught the class in that. I'm not saying you, like anybody. Like
me?
You have you don't, I'm sure of it.
Oh.
Something like a brain injury or something physical that might hinder the way in which your eye and brain connection function.
Yes.
Unless it's a case like that, we all zero in on high contrast. We all have these, we're all hardwired for a particular kind of cognition. High contrast is one of them. We'll zero in on it, like this big bright light. Can't help but, like, zero in on this hand if you're going to if you're freshly looking at any particular image. It's why film noir is so popular, is that
Right.
they've got both high contrast and motion working in conjunction. So we can't help but just be zeroed in on all of this stuff and emotionally react to that as well.
Yeah, chiaroscuro and the light and shadow is how we can tell the difference between like something that's coming at us or something that's far away from us. I mean, we're hardwired as humans to notice it. Even the thing they did with the babies, where they put a baby over what looks like a giant precipice, but it's just a flat drawing of, like, say, the edge of a building, and the babies instinctively do not go near it because they can already tell that height, is a problem.
I wonder who thought of that experiment.
A very interesting person, and maybe a little psychopathic.
Let's put this group of knives in front of a baby,
right?
And see if, like, they rock by it.
Functional psychopaths is what they call them. It's like it's a thing. It's an actual thing. It's like, so, like, for people who, for instance, who are able to do surgery, like most people, the idea of cutting a living body open.
Turn stuff off.
What's that?
You got to turn stuff off. Yeah.
So, okay, let's do the humanoid game. I'm gonna want to find out what I'll be drawing after this, and I won't. It'll be great. It'll be fantastic.
It has words that are mapped out in red. And those aren't necessarily, you can pick on any of the words and it will jump to photographs of that particular word. And I've tried to keep these, this is a way more complicated list than you'll see in Fantasy Genesis Characters, my new book. But it's the red words, you don't have to use them. It's just like there, again, for like a quick visual interpretation. If you get a jump on a particular, I got wood embers and Soviet ski vehicle, which I saw these like cool, like, turn of the century, last turn of the century, ski vehicles on, they had tread on them, or it's a military vehicle. But that I'm seeing, like, I'm coming up with the wood might be a steam powered ski vehicle. So where there's wood embers and it manifests in that way. So maybe like a steampunky ski vehicle. And it's already changed within the last couple of seconds. And that's the thing, that 1,000 ideas happening all the time, there is a lot that didn't get there just by not seeing the other, like, 9 or 10 other words that are there. Dungeness crab, doorhead ants. There's these ants that, like, dip under in their head forms it kind of doorway where they pop out. It's fascinating. I mean, I can spend hours. I maybe should have a warning, like, this is like a time burglar. You could spend hours just looking at pictures of baby owls.
Yeah. Doorhead ants are really disgusting, and oh my god, they're awful.
I've got equal amounts of cute and highly disturbing.
Oh my god. What is wrong with nature sometimes? I mean, it's fascinating, but oh my god, it's yeah, everybody, I'll be putting a picture of these up for everybody to see.
I think the sheep had fishes on there too. Oh
god, that's disturbing. Oh god. But
the basic idea of it is to, and it gives descriptions on all 4 games. It gives description of the kind of like rules, but rules to break, and just the infinite potentials that you get with just a couple of word associations, wordplay. And I've had writers use this. I've had even behavioral psychologists use it. The last version in the first book, Fantasy Genesis, not Fantasy Genesis Characters, in that it helped their patients build mini utopias to escape into.
Right.
And, like, essentially, it's a really good way of picking out, it's good for world building in that you can pick out any kind of portion of that world and zero in a couple of words just for that flora or fauna or environment. I'm looking at Japanese maple right here, and but mixing that with the facial elements of a mandrake ape. You know, that's like having those go leafish rather than.
That's
There's
interesting.
all sorts
Yeah.
that, like, I can go into any particular 2 words and come up with, you know, at least 5 or 10 variables. And that's how like folks silhouette concept work. The hassle isn't having too little to work with. It's having too much to work with.
I see.
So
Yeah, that's true.
this
That makes
kind
sense.
of focuses those variables into just 2 or 3 different things to have your mind flow
And
with.
you had behavioral psychologists ask you about it. So how did you come up with the idea for it? Did you, I mean, what was the thing that led to its creation?
The the original game, which I called Lukacian Flux back in school, was basically like projects weren't coming in directly after school. I wasn't one of the lucky few, and I always tell students, you know, this 1 to 5%ers that get work before they get out of school, that's, you know, it's still, it's even way more competitive nowadays than it was when I got out of school. But it was essentially a way in which to give me assignments that weren't coming in from faculty anymore. So I made the game, which is a lot simpler, but a lot more creatively effective in some ways, I'm noticing now, because I would have things like I would have much more specific things in Techne, like lava lamps and stuff. And for me to pick lava lamp now would have to come from here. It wouldn't come from the list. In any case, there's it was to fill that emptiness of not having a lot of work. And, you know,
So you had to do it to.
Go ahead.
It was there to keep you from going kind of like losing it, in a sense that if you're not creating something, you almost like don't know what to do with yourself.
Yeah, and it's a big danger. It really is. Like the first couple years after school, it's that's a real big risk. It's a real big gambit, and you've, you know, spent just hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases on schooling. And if you don't keep at it, almost like an athlete, I mean, just, you know, nowadays I can incorporate a kind of daily sketch regime into assignments. You know, it's just like I'm doing it anyways.
Yeah.
Or certainly commissions like I've got going now. But when you just get out of school and not, like, let's say no projects are coming, it's completely dry. The drive to do that, lessons and lessons and lessons. And if you have, let's say, a good barista gig, you got a good office data entry gig that allows you benefits and, you know, time off and stuff like that, it gets even less and less, and you just stop completely. And that's the danger. So
yeah,
this is a good way to, you know, keep up on that, give you enough variables to work with to keep the brain active, to keep you, you know, you sketching digitally or otherwise, and have you creating, not even visually. You could, you know, write from the words. You could create your own utopias with it.
that's I mean, that's really cool. It's a great idea, and I admire you for that. Not a lot of people can take emptiness and make it into something that is pregnant with life. It's cool. It's good stuff. And the book is the book that you put out. How old is it now? And where can people get it on your website? I'm assuming.
Fantasy Genesis characters, yeah. All major bookstores, Barnes and Noble. I've got a link to Powell's on the website, which is local to Portland, Oregon here. And there's copies like, there's used copies too on Amazon and stuff that I've noticed. But oh, there's a ton of stuff. Let's just go through it. I mean, on Parka blogs, I might give you a link. They have a flip through, but let's just flip through really quick here.
And we can put all the images up as we're flipping through and post and all that good stuff.
I've got 4 or 5 positions of the brow line and lip structure for the construction of complex facial anatomy. I've got muscle maps of the jawline and lip line to show what's happening just under the surface of the skin. So it's gets into some facial anatomy there, complex facial anatomy. I get into, which isn't on the Genesis generator, is the emotion action game. And this gives you, it's basically those 2 variables are an emotion and an action. And even doing torso shots, adding a hand gesture or just the inkling of a facial expression, that brings that character to life almost instantaneously.
I literally am like, oh my God, we could do angry farting. That would be so much fun to draw.
Farting is added, Aaron. When I get it up on Genesis Generator,
you have to.
Farting is going to be on there.
Farting is essential. It's something we all do, and it's important, and it's great comedy because it is the sphincter going like this.
I've got stuff on like behavioral aspects of the character archetype. I've got all sorts on hand gestures, which kind of character,
and
theatrically or literarily.
And you did all that. You did all this. You built all this over like your career, or is this something that was put together, in one piece, or did you sort of like accrue all this information as you went throughout your career, and then sort of synthesized it all into one book?
This has a review of what I gave in the first book, Fantasy Genesis, in terms of facial expression and the emotion action game, but it's wildly expanded upon. And to answer your question, yes, this is like kind of the accumulation of 10 years of teaching my character design class. So there's stuff on youth and aging a character, all sorts. And a lot of, I've got a cultural style game that is on the Genesis generator that brings elements of mixing costuming from different cultures, and having multicultural characters in general. I think in as much whitewashing is being done, in Hollywood, is, mixing in culture, it should be a huge part of every kind of characterization.
I agree.
I think.
Yeah, I agree totally. Yeah.
I'm loving the fact that Wizards has done a lot of this stuff. Kaya,
right.
Nico Aris in Kaldheim.
Yeah. They're consciously stepping into what they ignored over the years, and which I do not believe. I believe that people make mistakes, and people are not they're not purposefully doing this. It's just sort of it's difficult to step out of your world when you're not in it, and you don't always have the point of view of someone else. And when you're shown it, you're like, oh, hello.
It is. I don't want to get too political, but there's, all white cis males like myself, they have a little bit of when I say a little bit of introspection, I mean a lot of introspection to do, and try and get past the impossible bits, because it's difficult to have grown up a specific way and be taught that these are all the things that make you male, these are all the things that make you female in this binary situation, and then have that turned over midlife when all of those things are really solidified cognitively, like those things are very solidified.
Sorry, my
Doesn't
dogs.
mean it can't happen. Doesn't mean that we should constantly being in a state of change and a state of flux and able to, so where we can make things right at the end of the day. And it's not us that is saying this is right. We got to take that from the international community. You know, it's
Right.
a lot of folks, you know, part of that being male is like, oh, I've got to be very strong in my opinions, or I've got to be very strong in, I'm the leader.
I'm forceful. I'm forceful. It's
not that way. You've got to take cues from everybody else. You got to stop taking cues from the brutal way that we grew up in, you know, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and before that, you know, which drives that behavior.
I mean, it's definitely something that I mean, luckily, I am gay, so that makes me better than you guys, because, you know, I'm more evolved. No, but I luckily
cues from you, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I had a mother who was I have a mother who, she's still my mother. She is very much she's like in your face, but female. And so I never really realized that women were not like that. You know what I mean? Like I just imagine that women were also like very aggressive, and so I never had any sort of that like thing that some guys have where they can't handle a woman being in a position of power or something like that. And I never had it. I'm like, I'm used to a woman being in a position of power. I was raised by my mother. Like, you couldn't fuck with my mom. It was like, it wasn't gonna happen. So, but
That's great. That's great that you're, you know, born into a family situation like that. I was quite the opposite, in that military father, and just doing the best that he could with 2 kids, like, and where mother figure was gone during developmental times. So in many ways, that's kind of, it's reverse in that, where the power structure of the powerful female was lost for a whole section of developmental. And I think, I don't know, even if I wasn't raised by a military-minded male in one way or another, I think what we saw in commercials, what we saw on all of media, newscasters, all spoke to this. You know, you don't have to come from a family that dictates these things developmentally. It was dictated constantly in movies and television and everything all around us. Even games, like, was kind of the reason behind this sinister element of culture that we're dealing with right now. And I don't know, I think the best way to look at it is just, change is inevitable. If you're white cis male, you're not going to be the force that changes things. You should look to the cues of other folks internationally and from every, you know, all gender, all race, in order to use your privilege to forward their message, basically.
But see, you say that, but I also think that if you are a white cis male that is bringing good work to the fold and is respected and respectable, there is no reason why that a leader can be a leader in any sort of position. So like you are a voice that I think is something to be commended, and that does, and it's not negated because of that. I think that it's just, people need to, like you were saying, people need to sort of just be like ready to deal with being possibly like questioned by something, you know, questioning yourself.
We both are the minority in what, or you know, just Congress would look different.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I don't need convincing as much as when I speak of like white cis males, it's the majority of them, not
us, it's others.
I wouldn't think that I would be that kind of majority mentality. although I am,
I mean,
I give myself the credit for being a jerk. A lot of
yeah,
the
but
time.
I mean, you
But I
could be
don't think
you
that's
could be
the
a jerk.
majority.
You could be
Yeah.
a jerk, and any. I mean, it doesn't matter what's going on in your free zone. You could be a jerk no matter what. I mean, people are. I mean, humans are. We're wonderful and we're awful at the same time. Like if you hold up the best of us and the worst of us, you're like, ooh, wow, that is okay. Those are some poles right there.
Yeah, it's yeah, again, I don't want to get too political, but that's we need some heavy cultural change. Like we need to even to get back to the 80s in terms of where we were in multiculturalism. It is going to take a couple of years, and now that we've got camera video and stuff like that, that helps, but it helps only in as much as it's going to overturn these power structures. So that, and those power structures are filled with those jerky white cis males.
Yeah. I mean, most of them are bi anyway. They just are not cool with it.
They're covering.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like, methinks the lady doth protest too much. But yeah. Yeah.
I was going to go through the rest of the book, but there's period occupation game, which is on the Genesis generator too.
Yes.
Where you go through time period, effects, costuming. And then there's the 5 R's, which most of the book is like different modes of thought, but the 5 R's is a group of specific terminology to spur on specific modes of thought. And they are rotation, removal, replacement, ratio, and repetition. And like the humanoid game, in that I can get some things moving just by getting a couple of variables, thinking about different things and focusing in on a couple of different things that are words. These are more like modes of thought, in that it would be like actions, specific actions. So I've got a whole section of the book dedicated to the 5 R's, and that, removing a piece of or a part of a creature could make it more aquatic, let's say. Replacement is good with horror. And I've got like where there's ears replaced with, from eyes are replaced with ears. And there's this Dave Alsop illustration that I show, who's another fantasy, or another Magic the Gathering guy. Fingers with teeth. It's really good with horror. The thought of replacing parts with other parts.
Yeah. I was talking to Mark Zug about the face hugger, Geiger's face hugger, and that is such an example of like, yeah. Again, I say it looks like a spider scorpion that has it jumps. It has a vagina that impregnates you.
It's true.
It's what could possibly be more just off about that. I mean, they're horrifying. They're great, but yeah, it'd be it's definitely, I wonder it'd be really cool to see like what artists would do with your game, like if they had to do an assignment. If I ever make $1 billion doing nothing, which I'm sure I can do eventually, I will hire everybody to do that. I'd be like, that would be a good game.
Well, I've been developing a screenplay / graphic novel idea for the last 20 some years. And most of the stuff comes from these games that I've developed. Yeah. And that's the thing, that these aren't all games. I'd encourage folks just to develop their own games. That's what I do with students. And sometimes the best way to develop your skills is to while you're doing a piece, make a tutorial of that piece. And I see a lot of folks doing that online now, because it's easy enough. But if you've dissected, or if you've like compartmentalized a piece, that helps you. The next piece that you do is just going to have all of that knowledge, embedded into that next piece. So I encourage that. Like, I like my game, but the best thing to do is make your own games.
Well, I mean, I think that's the sign of it being a good game, is that if it organically inspires. Have you gotten anybody, any feedback from, or any sort of examples from people who have done it that you've seen that you're like,
Well, yeah.
wow.
I've got a whole blog. I'll give you there. I've kind of gone delinquent on doing posting student work, but the challenges of my class are basically these game challenges. And but I've got Fantasy Genesis blog. I'll give you the link to.
God, that must have been a cool art class, man. Lucky kids in that class.
Thank you.
Do they know? Like,
think so. I'd like to think so.
They know you're like a superstar artist, right? Like, they have to. They have to.
Some.
Really? Well, the ones who don't, it'd be like, guys, like, seriously? You did what rock have you been living under?
It can be a help and it can be a hindrance, really. It's
how so?
I don't
how can
want
it be
folks
a hindrance?
I don't want folks to not create because they're stifled by any work that any faculty does. It's like you shouldn't compete with your students.
No.
Have give them pathways to create themselves.
I've only noticed people who are in the positions of power that are teachers that compete with their students are people who are not really good at what they do.
Or just dicks.
Yeah, but generally they're just not good at what they do. There's a whole lot of like bitterness. And when they see a young talent, they want to destroy instead of nurture. And that's because they're fucking depressed. But you do not have that problem. So I don't see that, it's like you clearly have done well for yourself as an artist. And so it would be crazy if you were jealous. I'd be like, wow, of what?
From year to year, I can't express enough how much when I first started to teach, I accounted, folks growing up on a keyboard and mouse and drawing in different ways and creating in different ways had something to do with it. By the time, tablets were commonplace and we've got screens everywhere, we're communicating more through screens than we are in real life.
Yeah.
And that stifled culture in many ways. That's a curse. But the blessing is that from year to year, I see folks sketching an anatomy, like figurative anatomy, that took me just years and years out of books and seeing other folks sketch. There is no like videos to watch.
Yeah, there's no YouTube tutorials in the 80s and 70s.
Now they come first year and they're like spot on proportional anatomy and things. And I'm just like, this is the benefits. And I'm sad in many ways for culture because of electronic communication, but this is where it really comes into play and if I was ever jealous of a student, it would be in that way. It'd just be like, I didn't, have these resources.
Yeah, that's not that. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, like, it's just sort of like, man, damn, I wonder what I could have done if I'd had those resources at my disposal. But, at the same time, we got to meet people in person and they had heads and they were, they were live, which
it is now. I mean, if anybody's jealous of the resources, we have them now. So there's plenty of time to still learn. It's just, you don't have to have, you shouldn't have an ego about it and just like learn from square one, because that's where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give it a shot. But here's the thing. My stuff will be the best thing ever. And
yes,
I will be a huge success. It will be incredible. But I'd just to wrap it up though, is there any other things that you are doing as far as, I know you can't talk about it a lot, but are you working on anything magic related right now for the future?
I've got a couple pieces that I just handed in. Can't talk about it. got one that I thought was going to be printed, but it's been put on the back burner. So 3 pieces in, not printed, and I think I'm hopefully, fingers crossed, everything, that I'll have a couple more pieces in the months to come. But for me to be in this game for this long is just a constant blessing. I can't thank the folks at Wizards enough. Oh, you know what? Before I forget, I was going to mention everybody go to, because we kind of talked about politics a little bit before. Wizards came up with a new branding, and they've got this section I'd suggest everybody go to, who we are at the Wizards site. Okay. And it has a group of core values. And the first time I saw this with the illustrations and everything, I wept. It was kind of a tearjerker, because a lot of the stuff, again, like you said, we've been waiting for a long time for this to happen. There's there's been visible and battles within the community that everybody thinks that they need to take a side on. I would look at these core values. The fourth one is almost like I wanted to hand it to the Senate and say, make this, conform this to make the next amendment to the Constitution.
So we've got be legendary, build a well-rounded crew, delve into dungeons, don't split the party.
That's the one. Don't split the party. Read the rest of it off. And so it's not just don't split the party.
And then it takes a multiverse, but it says agree or for don't split the party, it says agree or disagree, but commit, collaborate, and have respect for others.
That's so good. It's so simple, but I mean, like,
it sounds,
those is just beautiful. I thought I'd mention them because it's like there is a dedicated move towards progressive change, and that's just like that's what we all need, and it's good to see it coming from one of these power structures.
Yeah, it's nice to hear somebody when you're saying I don't feel like I have a voice, and to have somebody say to you, we hear you. That in and of itself is such a relief. And we can hope that things will move in the right direction, and that the balances will come into check, and hopefully there will come a time where we don't have to discuss differences so vividly, because it's something that is de rigueur.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, it's nice to see you that passionate about it. I mean, it proves that not all white cis men are just troglodytes. So
I can't deny my troglodyte nature.
Oh, I'm a troglodyte too. Okay, I'm a troglodyte too.
My brain does speak on occasion, which is unfortunate.
It's like, I know it's the worst when it happens. It's like mine. It's terrible. It's
been a pleasure talking with you.
It's great talking to you too, and have a good day.
Thanks a lot.
All right,
we'll see you
bye.
later.
Hope you enjoyed my chat with Chuck. I'm telling you, keep your eye on him. Much like Mark Zug, I think there's going to be a secret lair for him, and it will be awesome. Well, that's all I have for now. So, like Woodward and Bernstein might have said when they uncovered Watergate, I got a scoop.